What becomes of a house that once ruled the skies? Can fire ever be chained? Can blood ever be pure? And when gods fall to madness, who dares remember their names? In the far reaches of memory, beyond the mists of time and truth, there lived a house born not of earth, but of flame. Its sigil was a three-headed dragon. Its words were not spoken, but burned. And its name, Targaryen, would echo through every corner of Westeros like a scream across the centuries. This is no tale of quiet nobility, nor one of peace bound by parchment. It is a saga of wings and war, of ancient sorceries and kings with fire in their veins. A tale of a people who soared above the world, astride living storms with scales of shadow and flame. And like all great legends, it began not in triumph, but in warning. Long before the Iron Throne was forged from 1,000 swords, long before Westeros knew the crack of a dragon's wing, there stood the freehold of Valyria, a civilization of sorcerer kings and fire-wielding lords who shaped the earth itself with spells and blood. Their dragons were not beasts, they were gods, and the Valyrians were their priests. But not even gods live forever. One among them, Daenerys, daughter of Lord Eonar Targaryen, was touched by dreamfire. She saw the doom before it came, cities crumbling, mountains exploding, skies raining ash and ruin. Eonar listened. He fled with his family, their dragons, and their treasures across the sea to the bleak Isle of Dragonstone. The world mocked them, but fate remembered. Then came the doom. Valyria perished in fire and scream. And so, from the ashes of that great empire, one house remained. The last dragon lords. The last speakers of the tongue of fire. The last to dream. 100 years later, Aegon rose. With his sisters at his side and his great beast, Balerion the Black Dread, beneath him, he waged a conquest that scorched the world. He did not ask for crowns, he took them. And from the bones of kings and the ruins of resistance, he forged the Iron Throne, a symbol of pain, of power, of dragon rule. Thus began 300 years of fire and fury. Glory, yes, but also betrayal, madness, prophecy, and ruin. The blood of the dragon is not easily held. It burns hotter than any forge and consumes those too weak to wield it. Through civil wars, rebellions, the extinction of dragons, and the madness of kings, the House Targaryen would come to know not only what it is to rule, but what it is to fall. This is the complete tale of House Targaryen. From the molten empire of old Valyria to the storm-swept birth of Daenerys Stormborn. From prophecy to conquest, from fire to silence. This is the story of a people who believed themselves destined to rule. And perhaps they were. If your heart stirs at the whisper of wings and ancient blood, then join us. Swear the oath. Subscribe now, and let the fires of old awaken once more in your veins. The dragons have not forgotten their riders. Nor should you. In the eastern reaches of Essos, where the land itself breathes smoke and the sea boils in places with unseen heat, there once stood a power that defied the gods. Valyria. The name still echoes like thunder through the vaults of memory. It was not a kingdom, nor an empire, but a force of nature cloaked in silver and fire. Born from the volcanic bowels of the world, raised by dragon lords, and crowned by sorcery, Valyria was the beating heart of the known world for more than 1,000 years. Its streets glittered with gold, its towers gleamed with fused stone, and its people, those chosen bloodlines of dragon riders, lived as demigods beneath the sky. But long before its splendor towered high, Valyria was no more than a clutch of shepherds who wandered the smoking peninsula. They tended their flocks in a land choked with ash and heat, where the ground trembled in its sleep. Then they found the dragons, terrible, winged things with fire in their breath and hatred in their eyes. Creatures the Giscari feared, the Rhoynar fled, and the world believed untamable. The shepherds tried and died, until one day they did not. The Valyrians claimed the beasts with blood and sorcery. bound them, rode them, made them into extensions of their will. And when the dragons soared, so did their masters. It was not conquest alone that built the freehold. It was fusion, magic and might, steel and spell, woven into a dominion that dwarfed all others. A realm ruled not by kings, but by dragon lords. 40 noble houses, each with its own dragons, its own seat in the High Council, its own power to shape the fates of millions. They built roads that never cracked, bridges that defied the sea, towers that rose like jagged lightning. They carved the land itself, redirecting rivers, splitting mountains, forging lakes where there were none. It was said that the Valyrians did not fear time. They forged monuments not for decades or centuries, but for eternity. At the height of its glory, the Valyrian freehold stretched from Slaver's Bay to the edge of the narrow sea. Its legions marched in lockstep, armored in dragon bone, wielding blades of Valyrian steel, steel forged in flame and folded with sorcery. Their enemies, old guys, the Undulls of the East, the Summer Kings, all fell. Only the Rhoynar resisted with any fury, and even their river magic drowned beneath dragon flame. And yet, in all their glory, the dragon lords were not without fear. Beneath their pride slithered ambition. The 40 families vied for dominance, each house seeking more dragons, more lands, more secrets. Marriages were forged to keep their blood pure. Valyrian blood, dragon's blood. Brothers married sisters. Fathers gave daughters to sons. They bred not for love, but for strength, for fire, for purity. It was said that in Valyria, the blood itself was sacred, and tainted blood, a kind of death. Among these 40 families stood House Targaryen. In stature, they were unremarkable. They held no seat on the highest councils, boasted no legions greater than their peers. But they possessed 3 great treasures: 5 dragons, a keep on the remote western edge of the empire, and a daughter who dreamed of fire. Her name was Daenerys the Dreamer. She was slender, solemn, and strange. At night, she tossed and cried, muttering in High Valyrian to shadows that weren't there. And one night, she screamed. A vision had seized her, a vision of death. The freehold in ruins. The towers of Valyria falling. The sky torn open. The earth split. Dragons howling in agony as fire devoured their flesh. The end of all things. Her father, Lord Enar Targaryen, listened, perhaps out of love, perhaps fear, perhaps the old blood whispered to him, too. He acted swiftly. Against all counsel, he sold his holdings, gathered his kin, and boarded ships bound west across the sea. They landed on a volcanic isle cloaked in mist and wrath, Dragonstone. There, they raised black towers of Valyrian stone and waited. The world mocked them. Other dragon lords called them mad, weak, broken by the fancies of a girl. But 12 years passed. Then the world ended. The doom of Valyria struck without warning and without mercy. All 14 of the great volcanoes that lined the freehold's spine erupted in a single day. Earthquakes swallowed cities. Firestorms scoured the land. Poisonous ash darkened the sun for years. Rivers boiled. The sea turned red. Some said 1,000 dragons died screaming. Others believed even death itself was scorched away, leaving only silence. Valyria, greatest empire ever forged by men, was gone. Its wonders lost. Its secrets vanished. Its lords dead. And all that remained of its glory was smoke. All but one house. The Targaryens endured. Alone on Dragonstone, they survived the end of their world. Their dragons lived. Their bloodline endured. And in time, the last of the Valyrians would rise, not as refugees or exiles, but as conquerors. But that rise would not come swiftly. For a century after the doom, the Targaryens stood apart from the realm of Westeros. They ruled only Dragonstone, a brooding keep of dark halls and volcanic heat, perched on the edge of the narrow sea. They watched. They waited. They listened to the wind, and they dreamed. 100 years after the doom, a new dragon lord stirred. His name was Aegon. No longer content with isolation, he looked west to the fractured kingdoms of Westeros, a continent torn by war, ruled by squabbling kings who bled their people dry for pride and banners. Aegon did not see borders. He saw a realm to be united, a people to be ruled, a destiny to be fulfilled. The blood of Valyria had not fled. It had merely slept. And now, fire stirred once more. The dragon lords were coming. In the dark halls of Dragonstone, where obsidian walls drink the firelight and the air smells of salt, ash, and age, the blood of Valyria beat like a drum in exile. The Targaryens, last of the dragon lords, waited, as if held in place by the whisper of a prophecy half forgotten, but never silenced. The doom had come and gone. The Valyrian freehold, the greatest empire ever wrought by sorcery and steel, was ash in the wind. And yet, one thread of fire remained unbroken. A single house, perched on a crag above the narrow sea, watched the world beyond and wondered when their time would come. The Targaryens had brought 5 dragons with them when they fled Valyria: Balerion, Vhagar, Meraxes, and 2 others whose names are lost to time. Over the years, some died, others were born. The dragons made their nests in the volcanic caverns beneath Dragonstone, where heat and shadow were constant. They grew slow, in silence, but they grew. And above them, the lords of House Targaryen ruled their small domain, proud and watchful. Enar Targaryen died not long after the doom, his faith in his daughter vindicated by fire. Daenerys the Dreamer lived many years more, her visions now revered as divine rather than mad. She did not speak often in her later years, but when she did, her words were heeded. She claimed that the doom had not ended the tale of Valyria, it had merely begun another. She wrote of another dream, half-formed and shadowed. A long night, a darkness that would swallow the world. A terror from the north, older than dragons, colder than death. And in this dream, she saw only one hope: a prince born of Valyrian blood, wielding the flame of dragons to stand against the night. The scrolls she left behind were locked in the vaults beneath Dragonstone, guarded and studied by her descendants. Most could not make sense of them. Others feared them, but the dream lingered. For nearly a century after the doom, the Targaryens kept to themselves. Westeros, across the narrow sea, was a land divided into 7 kingdoms, each ruled by a king with his own banners, ambitions, and feuds. There was no unity, only war and pride. And though the Targaryens could see the shores of that land from Dragonstone's highest tower, they did not yet move. Not until Aegon. Aegon Targaryen, son of Aerion and scion of Daenerys' line, was a quiet, tall man with eyes like molten violet and hair as pale as winter moonlight. He was a dragon rider, as his ancestors had been. But unlike those who came before him, he looked west with purpose. He had no interest in the shattered freehold behind him, nor in mourning what was lost. His eyes were fixed on what might yet be gained. He had 2 sisters, Visenya, fierce, cold, and unflinching, and Rhaenys, warm, curious, and full of laughter. They were his blood, his wives, his partners. The Targaryens still followed the old Valyrian custom of wedding within the family, preserving the purity of the blood and the strength of their line. It was said that Aegon loved Rhaenys more, but trusted Visenya more. Together, they formed the triad that would come to define an age. The dream had not died with Daenerys. It lived in Aegon. Whether he was haunted by her prophecies or driven by his own vision, none can say. But he began to prepare. Dragonstone's forges roared to life. Blacksmiths shaped new swords. Armorers crafted breastplates bearing the 3-headed dragon sigil, 1 head for each sibling. Messengers flew to the free cities, gathering sellswords and craftsmen, smiths, and spies. Maps of Westeros were drawn, studied, marked with ink and ash. Then, Aegon raised a great table, a single piece of carved wood, shaped and painted into the map of Westeros itself. The painted table, his kingdom not yet claimed, but already known to him. He did not believe in conquest for conquest's sake. The land across the sea was torn by chaos. 7 kings ruled it, some cruel, some honorable, all ambitious. Aegon believed it was his destiny to unite them, not just for power, but for peace. Not just for glory, but for something deeper, something older than the Iron Throne he had yet to forge. He called his bannermen, such as they were, few in number, House Valerion, ancient allies from the Driftmark Isle, House Celtigar of Claw Isle, a handful of captains, free riders, and dragon-worshipping mystics who had fled Valyria before its end. It was not a great host, not in numbers, but they had dragons. Valyrian, the Black Dread, largest of all, wings like thunderclouds, fire like the breath of gods. Vhagar and Meraxes, smaller, but deadly, swift, and cunning. The siblings rode them, and the air trembled beneath their flight. Aegon did not move in haste. He sent ravens to every lord in Westeros, bearing a simple message: kneel and join me. Resist and burn. Some laughed. Others ignored him. A few, like Torrhen Stark of the North, paused. Then Aegon crossed the sea. He landed on the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, at the spot where he would later raise his new capital. There, on the ash-blown shore, he raised a wooden fort and a banner, the red 3-headed dragon on black. His sisters landed to the north and south, securing the riverlands and burning resistance with dragon flame. He was not yet king, but the dream was taking shape. The lords of Westeros had no answer to dragonfire. Orys Baratheon, Aegon's rumored half-brother and fiercest general, led the armies against the Storm King. Visenya carved a path through the Vale. Rhaenys flew to the Reach and burned the fields of House Gardener to cinders. One by one, the kings fell or bent the knee. But it was not blood alone that won the realm. Aegon spared those who submitted, honored ancient customs, allowed lords to keep their lands and rule beneath his crown. He united not through slaughter, but through vision. The Iron Throne had not yet been forged, but already the realm was changing. Blacksmiths hammered in rhythm to dragon roars. Lords met beneath banners they had once warred against. And in the halls of Dragonstone, beneath the painted table, Aegon's dream was unfolding. The dream of doom had come to pass. Valyria was gone, but a new dream had taken its place. A dream of unity, of fire-given purpose, of a kingdom not born of madness, but of might. And at its heart burned the blood of the dragon. In the year 287 years before the birth of Daenerys Stormborn, a storm lashed the coast of Dragonstone. Lightning tore across the sky in white forks, and waves crashed against the cliffs like the wrath of the drowned god. Amid the howling tempest, a war council gathered within the black stone halls of Dragonstone, the last Valyrian holdfast. Aegon Targaryen stood at the head of the painted table, his hands resting on the carved ridges of Westeros. His violet eyes, ancient and unreadable, studied not just the map, but the fate it contained. The conquest had begun. At Aegon's command, 3 hosts set sail across the narrow sea. The largest, under Aegon himself and his feared Mount Balerion, landed at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, where he raised a wooden fort and named the land around it King's Landing. It was not yet a city, merely a crude beachhead, a promise of what would come. To the north, Visenya landed near the Vale, at a fishing village that would become Maidenpool. To the south, Rhaenys touched down on the shores of the Reach, where fields stretched green and golden to the horizon. The 7 kingdoms were fractured, proud, and bloodbound to war. In the north, King Torrhen Stark ruled from Winterfell, cold and honorable. In the Vale, Queen Shara Arryn held the Eyrie for her young son, Ronald. In the Riverlands, the Black Heron sat brooding in his monstrous fortress of Harrenhal. The Iron Islands were ruled by House Targaryen, whose iron-born lords raided the western shores with salt and steel. In the Reach, the gardeners of Highgarden traced their blood to Garth Greenhand, ancient king of fields. In the Stormlands, Argilac the Arrogant held Storm's End. And in the west, Loren Lannister sat proud atop Casterly Rock. 7 crowns, 7 kings, and 1 man with dragons. Aegon's first war was against Argilac Durrandon, who mocked the young dragon lord and challenged him to single combat. Aegon refused. "I do not fight duels. I win wars." The insult was answered with fire. Orys Baratheon, Aegon's closest companion, some say his bastard brother, led the charge. When they met at the last storm, the battle turned not on steel, but on flame. Rhaenys and Meraxes fell from the sky like a second sun, and the Storm King and his host burned beneath them. Orys took Argilac's daughter to wife and his house's sigil, thus founding House Baratheon, ever loyal to the dragon crown. Next fell Harren the Black. The Riverlands had long suffered beneath the yoke of House Targaryen. Harrenhal, the greatest fortress ever built by men, rose from the banks of the God's Eye Lake like a black claw of stone and hubris. Harren believed no flame could breach his walls. He was wrong. On the day of his defiance, Valyrian came. The Black Dread, wings like thunderclouds, shadowed the sun. His fire was black and red, hotter than forge or volcano. He did not breach the walls. He melted them. The stone towers of Harrenhal wept and ran like wax. Harren and his sons burned alive within their halls of pride. The Riverlands rose up, cheered Aegon as liberator, and named House Tully their overlords for backing him first. In the Vale, Visenya climbed the Giant's Lance, the mountain path that led to the Eyrie. Alone, she appeared in Queen Shara's court, her dragon Vagr perched high above, watching. She offered peace, and Shara, seeing the fire in the skies and the doom that defiance would bring, bent the knee. Her son, Ronal Arryn, was lifted onto Visenya's dragon and flew through the clouds. When he returned, giggling and elated, he named Aegon his king. But the Reach would not kneel so easily. House Gardener called its banners. 50,000 swords gathered beneath the golden rose. King Mern IX rode at their head, brave and proud. At the Field of Fire, Aegon and his sisters met them. 3 dragons descended in unison, and the world turned to flame. Grass turned to ash. Men burned in their armor. The scent of cooked flesh haunted the land for years. King Mern died with all his sons, his line extinguished in an hour. Lord Harlan Tyrell, steward of Highgarden, opened its gates to Aegon. The Tyrells were named lords paramount of the Reach, and the realm bled anew. Still, the West and the North remained. Loren Lannister, King of the Rock, rode forth with the remnants of the Reach's host. He met Aegon near the Gold Road. Fire answered steel. Valyrian roared, and the men of the Rock scattered. Loren survived. He bent the knee and was named Lord of Casterly Rock. In the north, Torrhen Stark marched south with 30,000 men. He crossed the neck, saw the fires rising from the fields, and heard the tales of melted stone and burning kings. That night, he met with Aegon's envoys. The next morning, he knelt. They called him the king who knelt. But no northern blood was spilled, and House Stark retained Winterfell. Aegon honored his loyalty with respect and trust, and the North remembered. Within 2 years, all of Westeros south of the Wall bent to the dragon. Only Dorne stood defiant. Aegon crowned himself on the same hill where he had first raised his banner. His crown was simple, a circlet of Valyrian steel set with rubies. His sword was Blackfire, forged in old Valyria and carried into every battle. His rule was absolute, yet tempered by his sisters. Visenya was his shield, cold and stern, commander of warriors and justice. Rhaenys was his psalm, beloved by the people, curious and open-hearted. Each rode a dragon, and each bore a vision for the realm. From the melted swords of his fallen foes, Aegon ordered the creation of a throne unlike any other. Forged by fire, twisted, jagged, and terrible, it rose from the Red Keep in sharp defiance. The Iron Throne, not a seat of comfort, but of power, pain, and vigilance. He ruled not by divine right, but by dragon's flame and blood. And yet, Aegon was no tyrant. He kept the faith of the people. He allowed the Septons to spread the faith of the Seven. He preserved the laws of the realms he conquered. He named lords and ladies from the existing noble lines, respecting the old ways while building a new world. In doing so, he secured peace not just through fear, but through order. But Dorne, ever proud, resisted. Rhaenys flew south to demand fealty. She was met not by an army, but by silence. Castles abandoned. Roads empty. She found only a letter nailed to a gate in Sunspear. You may burn us, but you will never rule us. She returned to Dragonstone, uneasy. Aegon prepared for war. But the conquest was done. The Seven Kingdoms were 6, and one king ruled above them. Aegon Targaryen. Aegon the Dragon. Aegon the Conqueror. The conquest was done. Aegon Targaryen, first of his name, stood atop a continent that had knelt before fire. The Iron Throne, jagged and terrible, was forged from the blades of 1,000 fallen foes, molten, twisted, and cooled by the roar of Valyrian, the Black Dread. It was not a seat, but a warning, a reminder that the dragon did not ask for loyalty, it demanded it. Yet even dragons must rule. And so Aegon, alongside his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys, began the long and delicate labor of forging peace from conquest. The realm was now one, but it was far from unified in heart. The scars of war were fresh. The field still smoked from the field of fire. The great houses brooded, stripped of crowns, but not of pride. To bring unity, Aegon would need more than fire. He would need vision. He named his new capital upon the spot where he had first set foot during the war, the mouth of the Blackwater Rush. No existing seat would do. Not Harrenhal, melted and cursed. Not Old Town, bound to the faith. Not Dragonstone, too steeped in the ghosts of Valyria. A new city, built from ash and promise, King's Landing. It began as wood and mud, a crude sprawl of forts and tents. But with the might of the crown and the will of dragons behind it, the city grew swiftly. Roads were paved, docks extended, walls raised. Gold cloaks were formed to keep order. The City Watch, sworn to keep peace beneath the dragon banner. By the end of Aegon's reign, King's Landing had become a true capital, vast, filthy, vibrant, and dangerous. The realm itself was divided into administrative regions, each governed by one of the great houses: Stark in the north, Arryn in the Vale, Lannister in the west, Tully in the Riverlands, Tyrell in the Reach, Martell and Dorne, and Baratheon in the Stormlands. These were now lords paramount, sworn vassals to the Iron Throne. They ruled their lands, but their swords and loyalty belonged to the crown. To bind them more tightly, Aegon kept his court mobile in his early reign, riding from region to region upon Valyrian's back, settling disputes, honoring oaths, and reminding all of his power. In some places, he was greeted as a god. In others, with fear and silence. But everywhere he went, he listened. He upheld the laws of the realm, even those of kingdoms he had conquered. This choice, though shrewd, was more than strategy. Aegon knew that peace did not lie in the crushing of culture, but in the weaving of it. The old gods were still worshipped in the north. The faith of the Seven still ruled hearts in the south. He made no move to destroy either. Instead, he sought their blessing. He rode to Old Town, the most ancient city in Westeros and home of the Starry September, where the High Septon resided. There, he knelt, king before priest, and accepted the anointing oil. The Seven named him their chosen, and in that moment, fire and faith were bound. The faith, seeing the strength of Aegon's rule and the loyalty of his bannermen, bent its knee. The High Septon crowned him in the sight of gods and men, and the dragons were no longer heathen beasts, but instruments of divine order. Aegon's reign, now sanctified, took deeper root. But peace does not lie forever beneath the wing of dragons. In the 10th year of his reign, Rhaenys flew to Dorne once more. The Martells had never submitted, never bent the knee. Their castles stood empty when approached. Their soldiers vanished into sand and stone. Dorne could not be conquered like the rest. It had no heart to burn, no pride to bait. The Dornish would not give battle. So Rhaenys came to Sunspear. She met resistance, silent, sudden, and merciless. Her dragon, Meraxes, was struck down by a scorpion bolt and fell from the sky. Rhaenys perished in the wreckage. Some say she survived the fall, only to die in the dungeons of the Martells. Others claim her body was never found. But one truth was certain: the dragon was slain. Aegon's wrath was terrible. He and Visenya waged a war of vengeance upon Dorne. For 2 years, dragonfire scoured the sands. Towns were burned, wells poisoned, lords hunted. And still, no prince appeared. No army came forth. Only shadows and knives. Dorne did not yield, and Aegon, for all his fury, could not tame it. Eventually, he withdrew. For the first time, the dragon turned from the field not defeated, but denied. Dorne would remain free for more than a century yet. Visenya took the loss in silence. Cold, grim, unyielding, she devoted herself to defense. At her command, the Red Keep was raised, a fortress within the capital, its hidden passages known only to her and her spies. She commissioned the construction of the Dark Sister, a blade forged for her alone, and she founded the Kingsguard, 7 knights sworn to protect the king with their lives. Clad in white, bound by oath and silence, they became the silent steel of the throne. Aegon ruled for 37 years. He fathered sons by both sisters. With Visenya, he had Maegor, a brooding, cruel child. With Rhaenys, he had Aenys, fair and mild of heart. When Aegon died, the realm mourned, for peace had never been so deep, nor power so strong. He had united a continent with dragons, but ruled it with restraint. He left behind a kingdom bound in law, faith, and fire. And yet, in that legacy lay the seeds of future ruin. For Aenys, gentle and indecisive, would inherit the crown, and Maegor, fierce and unbending, would covet it. Their conflict would test the very foundation Aegon had forged. But that tale lies beyond his time. In the days of Aegon the Conqueror, the realm knew a rare balance. The dragons ruled from above, but the land below was not scorched. The great houses bowed, but did not break. The faith submitted, but was not silenced. It was an age of glory, of strength, of dreams fulfilled. The rule of dragons had begun. In the height of their power, the Targaryens were more than kings and queens. They were dragon lords, living demigods, their reign of flame stretching across centuries. But fire, too, can devour itself. And in time, the very wings that shadowed the realm would beat against one another in fury. The Dance of the Dragons, a name spoken in dread by maesters, whispered in the crypts of kings, and etched in the ruins of the realm. It was no dance, but a civil war, fought not only with steel and treachery, but with dragonfire that turned castles to cinders and skies to ash. The seeds of war were sown in the reign of King Viserys I, a ruler of peace and plenty. The realm prospered beneath his soft hand, and for a time, it seemed the Targaryen line had returned to the grace of Aegon's vision. But beneath the golden veil of peace, the blood of the dragon simmered. Viserys named his daughter Rhaenyra as his heir. She was his firstborn, of pure Valyrian descent, silver-haired and proud. He raised her in the shadow of the Iron Throne, gave her a place on his councils, and made the lords of the realm swear fealty to her in youth. Her claim was clear, her right confirmed. But not all would bend to a queen. Viserys remarried, taking Alicent Hightower to wife, a woman of ambition and steel veiled in silk. She bore him sons, and in time, a court divided. The Greens, the party of Queen Alicent, who favored her sons. The Blacks, the party of Princess Rhaenyra, the named heir. As the children grew, so too did the bitterness. Slights, rivalries, and whispers wound like ivy around the court, choking all hope of peace. When Viserys died, the storm broke. Queen Alicent and her allies moved swiftly. Her eldest son, Aegon, was crowned in the dragon pit with haste and secrecy. The Iron Throne, sharp with Aegon's blade, welcomed a new king. But in Dragonstone, Rhaenyra crowned herself as well, with her father's crown, before the bones of her mother. She was queen in her heart, queen by law, and war was made. Thus began the dance. Brother against sister, dragon against dragon. The skies of Westeros turned black with wings. Rhaenyra's court held Dragonstone, and her supporters included House Valerion of Driftmark, the greatest naval power in the realm, and several lords of the Riverlands. Her husband, Daemon Targaryen, prince, rogue, warrior, and dragon rider, was her sword, and his ambition was as boundless as his love for her. He rode Caraxes, the blood Wyrem, lean and savage. Aegon too held King's Landing and the greater strength of the royal court. Backed by the Hightowers of Old Town, the Lannisters of the West, and the might of the Reach, his claim was rooted in patriarchy and power. His dragon, Sunfire, was a creature of gold and flame, radiant and deadly. The first blood spilled was that of a boy. Rhaenyra's son, Lucerys Valerion, was sent as envoy to Storm's End. There, he found Aemon Targaryen, Aegon's brother, rider of Vhagar, the oldest and fiercest of all living dragons. Words turned to rage. Lucerys fled into storm-tossed skies, but Vhagar gave chase. What happened above Shipbreaker Bay was not war, it was vengeance. Aemon's dragon caught Lucerys in the storm, tore through his mount, and the prince fell into the sea, devoured by wind and wrath. There would be no mercy after that. Daemon answered blood with blood. In the depths of King's Landing, he hired assassins who crept into the royal nursery and slew one of Aegon's sons in his cradle and cut out the eye of another. The realm reeled. No village was safe, no castle secure. War burned through the Riverlands. Castles fell, armies clashed, and always above, the dragon screamed. In the Battle of Rook's Rest, Rhaenys Targaryen, Rhaenyra's cousin, called the queen who never was, rode Meleys into battle against Aegon and Aemon. They met in the sky. Meleys fought bravely, tearing into Sunfire and Vhagar alike. But she was outmatched. All three dragons crashed to the ground, a storm of scale and fire. Rhaenys perished, and Aegon was terribly burned, maimed, and near death. For weeks, he vanished from court, while Aemon ruled in his stead. The city of Tumbleton fell to betrayal. The two betrayers, Ser Ulf and Ser Hugh, dragon seeds of uncertain birth, turned against Rhaenyra's cause, claiming their dragons and sacking the town in her name, then in their own. Lords were butchered. Oaths meant nothing. The horrors escalated. Daemon seized Harrenhal, but Aemon pursued. The two princes, each atop a mighty beast, met above the God's Eye Lake. Vhagar and Caraxes fought like demons, flame and claw shattering the sky. They crashed into the lake, locked in death. Daemon, wounded and laughing, is said to have leapt from his saddle and driven Dark Sister through Aemon's eye as they fell. Neither man rose again. With her enemies slain, Rhaenyra took King's Landing. She sat the Iron Throne, briefly, but the cost had been monstrous. Her dragons dead or scattered, her sons buried or missing. The people turned against her. Famine gripped the city. The mob screamed for her blood. When Aegon returned, scarred, broken, but alive, he retook the city. Rhaenyra was betrayed, captured, fed to her brother's dragon as her last surviving son. Aegon the Younger watched in horror. The dance ended not with triumph, but with silence. All told, more than 20 dragons died, most of them the last of their kind. Whole lines of nobility were extinguished. Towns were razed. Trust shattered. The realm was left hollow, its rulers maimed by grief. Aegon II reigned only briefly thereafter. Sick, paranoid, and haunted, he died under suspicious circumstances. Poison, some say, in revenge for his sister's death. His heir was Rhaenyra's son, the boy who had watched his mother burn. Thus, the Iron Throne passed to the blood of both warring factions. Peace returned, but it was peace atop bones. The dragons never recovered. Though a few clutches would hatch in the years to come, they were small, sickly things, pale shadows of their ancestors. The fire was fading. The dance of the dragons was the death knell of House Targaryen's might, not in crown or name, but in essence. They had turned their greatest gift against themselves, and the realm would never forget the price. Brothers burned brothers. Sisters ate sisters. Skies turned black. Thrones melted, and the children of Valyria wept flame. The war had ended, but the wounds it left upon the realm were deep and festering. The dragons were broken. The royal bloodline, once proud and unshakable, was now cracked and bleeding. The great houses smoldered with loss, their banners soaked in the blood of sons and daughters sent to fight in a war none of them could stop once it began. And from the wreckage of the dance rose a boy, Aegon the Younger, crowned in grief, cloaked in silence, and haunted by fire. He had watched his mother, Queen Rhaenyra, devoured alive by sunfire. His elder brothers were dead, his kingdom burned, and the skies that once thundered with dragons now lay empty. Aegon III, as he would be known in history, ruled a realm where dragons no longer soared, and the people looked to the sky in fear, not awe. His reign began in sorrow and ended in stillness. Though he wore the crown, it seemed to weigh heavier upon him than it ever had on those before. He rarely smiled, seldom spoke, and almost never left the Red Keep. The court called him Aegon the Unlucky, Aegon the Broken, but most knew him as Aegon the Dragonbane, for in his time, the last of the dragons died. Those few pitiful creatures that had hatched during and after the dance were malformed and sickly, their wings stunted, their fire flickering weakly. The great beasts of Aegon the Conqueror's age, Balerion, Vhagar, Meraxes, were now only skulls mounted in silence beneath the Red Keep. The line of fire had gone cold. One by one, the dragons of Aegon's reign withered and died. No new clutch survived. No egg hatched strong. Some whispered that it was the will of the gods. Others blamed the bloodshed of the dance, saying the dragons had turned against their riders for the betrayal of kin. Others still claimed that the loss was not natural, that the magic of old Valyria had begun to fade, and with it, the source of all dragonkind. Aegon III himself ordered the last dragon's corpse burned and the bones buried deep beneath the keep. He made no public mourning. Some claimed he hated the beasts for what they had done. Others believed it was guilt, that he had watched the last flickers of his family's greatness die and could do nothing to stop it. In truth, Aegon III was not a cruel king, nor a weak one. He stabilized the realm. He brought peace to a kingdom ravaged by civil war. He re-established trade, reappointed faithful bannermen, and restored the royal treasury. But his reign was marked by shadow. He rarely attended court, and when he did, he sat as if carved from ice. His courtiers ruled in his stead, and his hand changed often. Many resigned or fell ill, as if cursed by the weight of the realm's sorrow. He died young, as if the grief that had settled on his shoulders in youth had seeped into his bones. But his sons survived, and so the line of kings continued. His successor, Daeron I, looked not inward, but southward, to the last realm that had never bent the knee, Dorne. He was young, bold, and driven. At just 14, he took up sword and crown and vowed to succeed where his ancestors had failed. "Why should a single realm stand apart while the rest are one?" he asked his lords. "I will make the 7 kingdoms whole." His armies marched, swift and ruthless, and the young king led from the front. Dorne was unprepared for the fire and steel that came upon it. Sunspear fell. Castles bowed. Lords swore oaths beneath the shadow of swords. And for a brief, flickering moment, the Targaryens claimed victory. Daeron returned to King's Landing triumphant. He was hailed as Daeron the Young Dragon. But Dorne does not forget, and it does not forgive. Guerrilla war followed. Ambushes and mountain passes. Poison in food and water. Assassins cloaked as servants and allies. It was not open war, but it was death nonetheless. A year after his victory, Daeron was slain in the Red Sands. Some say it was during a parley. Others, a trap in a canyon. Either way, the young dragon fell, and with him, his conquest. Dorne slipped once more from the Targaryen grasp, untamed and unbowed. After Daeron came Baelor, called Baelor the Blessed, a king of piety, of peace, and of perilous visions. He walked barefoot across the realm, fasting and praying, giving alms and pardons. He made peace with Dorne by marrying his cousin to a Dornish prince, and so, for a time, blood was traded for bloodless union. But Baelor's zeal was as sharp as any sword. He built a great sept in the heart of King's Landing, the September of Baelor, crowning the hill with faith rather than fire. He dissolved brothels, banned tourneys, and locked his own sisters away in the maiden vault, believing temptation a sin too terrible to risk. Some loved him, others feared his madness. He died fasting, seeking divine truth. His ribs were visible beneath his skin. His eyes saw only visions. And when the gods gave him silence, his body gave in. Thus passed the blessed king. And with his death, the pendulum of rule swung once again. The realm entered a period of instability. Kings followed kings, some wise, some wicked. The Blackfire rebellions would soon rise, born of a bastard's blade and a divided crown. The Targaryens, though still perched upon the Iron Throne, began to show the strain of centuries. And all the while, the dragons did not return. Eggs were preserved. Spells were whispered. But no fire stirred within the stone. The blood of the dragon remained, but the dragons themselves were gone. The skies were silent. The world remembered their terror, but not their grace. And the house that once ruled by air and flame now ruled by memory alone. The dance had not merely killed the dragons. It had broken their future. Where once they were gods among men, the Targaryens were now mortal. Regal still. Feared, perhaps, but no longer unassailable. Their thrones creaked like any other. Their enemies plotted not with swords, but with ink and marriage. And their legacy, once immortal, now faded into something fragile. A memory of fire. A crown of ash. The ashes of the dance still smoldered in every corner of the realm. When a dragon loses its flame, it does not die all at once. It cools slowly, its fire lingering in the marrow, waiting, hoping, seething. So it was with House Targaryen. Though the dragons were gone, their legacy still burned. And from the embers of royal pride, a new fire was kindled, not from across the sea, but from within their own blood. The Blackfire rebellions. Not one war, but 5. Not a single break, but a long, bleeding wound that spanned near a century. They were wars of kin against kin, of honor claimed and stolen, of bastards made kings and kings made corpses. And all of it began with a sword. The reign of King Aegon IV, known to history as Aegon the Unworthy, was a rod upon the crown. He was a man of great appetites and little virtue, lavish in gifts, lecherous in bed, and prone to cruelty when the mood struck him. He sired more bastards than any Targaryen before or since. It was said a woman could not serve at court without risking a royal child, nor a nobleman keep his wife or daughter far from the king's lust. Among these many base-born children, none shone brighter than Demon Waters, the son of Aegon IV, and Serene Eye of Lys. Tall, charismatic, golden-eyed, and bold in battle, Daemon was raised in courtly splendor and trained as a knight. He bore the Targaryen looks truer than many of his legitimate kin. He won tournaments, composed songs, and captured the hearts of lords and ladies alike. But it was not love that lit the spark of rebellion. It was the sword, Blackfire. Forged in Valyria and passed from Aegon the Conqueror to his heirs, it was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of kingship, of right and rule. Aegon IV, in his final years, placed the blade in Daemon's hands and legitimized all his bastards in a single act of madness. It was a gesture of spite toward his lawful son and heir, Daeron II, a scholarly, peaceful man who married a Dornish princess and sought unity through diplomacy. To the great lords, the sight of Daemon with Blackfire in hand spoke louder than any proclamation. And though the dying king had not named Daemon his heir, the message was clear enough. Daemon took a new name, Blackfire, and with it, a cause was born. He claimed his father's true will had been suppressed. That Daeron, the Dornish prince, was no true son of Aegon. That the realm needed a warrior king, not a soft-handed scholar. Lords gathered to his side. House Peak, House Strickland, and most dangerously, House Hightower. Half the realm teetered, for many still smarted from Dorne's integration into the Seven Kingdoms. They saw in Daemon not only a rightful heir, but a return to fire and strength. Thus began the first Blackfire Rebellion. It was war as the realm had not seen in generations. Daemon's host was vast, his charisma blinding. He rode at the front with Blackfire in hand, a red dragon reversed, black upon red. His twin sons rode beside him, brave and deadly. Across the field came Daeron's forces, led by Lord Hand Brynden Rivers, known as Bloodraven, a pale, shadow-eyed sorcerer born of bastardy, loyal only to the throne and haunted by prophecy. The two sides clashed at the Redgrass Field. It was there that the fate of the Blackfires was written in blood. Daemon Blackfire, bold and fierce, cut a path through his enemies until a volley of arrows, loosed from afar by Bloodraven's hidden archers, struck him down. His sons died beside him. His host broke and scattered. The Black Dragon had fallen. But rebellion, once born, does not die easily. The remaining sons of Daemon fled across the narrow sea, finding refuge in the free cities, especially Tyrosh, where sympathizers cloaked them in gold and whispers. From exile, they plotted their return. Each generation birthed new claimants, each more determined than the last. The second Blackfire Rebellion rose in the reign of Aerys I, a cautious, bookish king. Daemon's second son, Haegon Blackfire, landed in Westeros with mercenaries and promises. But the realm did not rise to greet him. Bloodraven, now Lord Commander of the Night's Watch and Warden of the realm's secrets, moved swiftly. The rebellion was crushed before it could breathe. In the third, Daemon III Blackfire, grandson of the first, tried again. His forces landed at Massey's Hook, but found only steel and death. He was slain in single combat, and the crown held firm. But the fourth was the most dangerous. Bitter Steel, Igor Rivers, another bastard son of Aegon IV, fierce and vengeful, formed the Golden Company, a Sellsword brotherhood bound by exile, honor, and the dream of return. Beneath the gold, the bitter steel, they swore, and their loyalty to House Blackfire became legend. In the Stepstones, in the disputed lands, in every free city that saw gold and banners unfurl, the Golden Company waited for the hour to strike. They returned to Westeros with Daemon IV, and for a time, chaos ruled the Stormlands. But once more, the throne held. The fifth rebellion was the last. Meleys the Monstrous, the last male of the Blackfire line, rose with the Golden Company during the War of the Ninepenny Kings. He was a horror, a brute of a man with a second head sprouting grotesquely from his neck. But he was cunning, and his army was vast. They seized islands, threatened the mainland, and nearly pierced the defenses of the Reach. They were met by a new breed of hero. Ser Barristan Selmy, young and unproven, rode alone into Maelys' camp and slew him in single combat. The Golden Company scattered. The last Blackfire lay in the dirt, two heads bleeding into the same soil. The war was over. The line was ended. But the pain endured. The Blackfire rebellions left scars not only on the battlefield, but in the minds of kings. Targaryen rulers became more suspicious, more ruthless. Bastards were watched with wary eyes. The court turned on itself in cycles of paranoia and whisper. The kings no longer rode dragons, nor ruled with unshaken will. They ruled as men do, afraid. The echoes of the Blackfires can still be heard, some say, in the halls of power. In the exiles who plot, the mercenaries who march beneath gold banners, the bastard swords that still thirst for crowns. For though the Blackfire name is gone, the fire that birthed it, ambition, vengeance, pride, remains alive in the blood. A dragon divided is a dragon slain, and House Targaryen had been divided far too many times. Power, once held too long, becomes a shadow that clings to blood and bone. It corrupts even the strongest lineage, twisting pride into madness and dreams into nightmares. In House Targaryen, the legacy of dragon lords turned inward. The sky was no longer their dominion, and without dragons to soar above the realm, many Targaryens began to fall beneath the weight of their own blood. The line that had once brought unity to Westeros now bred fear. The whispers grew louder in the Red Keep. Tales of kings who heard voices, of princes who set pyres for play, of queens who drank wildfire and saw the gods. And at the end of this darkening trail stood the last king of the line, Aerys II Targaryen, known to the world as the Mad King. But madness had crept in long before him. After the Blackfire rebellions had scorched the realm and the dragons had faded into skulls, the Targaryen kings became more erratic, each marked by strange behaviors or obsessions. King Aegon V, called Egg in his youth, had once dreamed of justice. He walked among the small folk, took humble counsel, and sought to break the cycles of blood by marrying his children for love or loyalty rather than alliance. But his reforms angered the lords, and his reign ended in tragedy. It was at Summerhall, a summer palace turned funeral pyre, where Aegon V perished alongside his eldest son and others still unnamed. The cause? A final, desperate attempt to hatch dragon eggs. The flames consumed him, and with him, the last true hope for fire reborn. Only a boy survived the blaze. Prince Rhaegar, born amidst smoke and sorrow, with eyes like storms and songs in his blood. His father, Jaehaerys II, ruled only briefly and passed the crown to Aerys, a young, handsome man, full of promise. At first, the realm hoped. Aerys began his reign with vigor and charm. He knighted his friend Tywin Lannister, made him Hand of the King, and surrounded himself with men of talent. The future seemed golden, but gold tarnishes quickly in dragonfire. Aerys grew jealous of Tywin's popularity, seeing in him a rival rather than a servant. When Tywin's wife died in childbirth, and Aerys mocked her memory, a rift formed between crown and council. Aerys's paranoia deepened. He began to see enemies in every shadow. He withdrew from court, allowing his beard and nails to grow wild, whispering to himself and refusing to be touched. He burned people alive. At first, they were traitors, then lords, then servants, then anyone. Wildfire became his obsession. He believed it sacred, a gift of the gods. He ordered vast caches of it hidden beneath King's Landing, beneath the septs, the streets, the Red Keep itself. He spoke of burning the city to cleanse it of betrayal, of ascending as a dragon reborn through flame. His queen, Rhaella, suffered in silence. His court cowered. His son, Rhaegar, turned to prophecy and song, retreating from his father's madness. Rhaegar was the realm's last hope. Tall, somber and brilliant. He was a prince of both sword and harp. The small folk adored him. Lords respected him. He was everything Aerys was not. But Rhaegar too was burdened with dreams, with sorrow, with a prophecy passed down through dragon's blood. He believed the end was coming. A darkness in the north, a winter without end, a song of ice and fire. And so he searched, in books, in signs, and then, one day, in a girl, Lyanna Stark, the betrothed of Robert Baratheon. She was said to be wild as the north wind, beautiful, fierce, and untamed. Rhaegar crowned her queen of love and beauty at the tourney of Harrenhal, passing over his own wife, Elia of Dorne. And not long after, Lyanna vanished. Some say she fled with him. Others say she was taken. The realm did not wait for truth. Brandon Stark, her brother, rode to King's Landing and demanded her release. Aerys had him burned alive, strangled by a noose as wildfire licked his flesh, his father watching, helpless, until he too perished. The North cried out for vengeance. The banners of Baratheon, Stark, Tully, and Arryn rose in fury. The rebellion had begun. Robert Baratheon led the storm. Eddard Stark brought the cold. Jon Arryn, wise and seasoned, held their cause together. It was not just a war for a woman. It was a war against madness. Aerys sent his last loyal men to hold the capital. He kept his son Rhaegar from battle, believing him safer at court. But Rhaegar knew that he must face the fury he had summoned. At the Trident, he met Robert, prince and rebel, crown and hammer. Rhaegar wore black armor, adorned with rubies that glinted like spilled blood. He fought valiantly, but Robert's strength was a storm. His warhammer crushed Rhaegar's breastplate and scattered the rubies into the river. The prince died with Lyanna's name on his lips. Aerys, maddened and cornered, ordered the city burned. "Let them come," he screamed. "Let Robert take a city of ash." His pyromancers stood ready to ignite the wildfire caches hidden beneath the city. But he was betrayed. Jaime Lannister, youngest of the Kingsguard, slew the pyromancer, then drove his sword through the Mad King's back. His white cloak was stained red, his honor broken to save the realm. Robert marched into the city, took the throne, and found it soaked in death. Eddard Stark arrived days later, finding Lyanna dying in a tower far to the south. What she whispered with her final breath, only he ever knew. But he left with a child and a secret. The war was won. The Targaryens were broken. Rhaegar's wife, Elia, and her children were butchered by Lannister men, their skulls presented to Robert as tokens. The fury of the dragon had become ashes. Only 2 Targaryens survived. Viserys, a boy clinging to birthright like a drowning man to driftwood, and Daenerys, born as her mother died, amidst a storm, the last cry of a dying dynasty. They were spirited across the narrow sea, into exile, forgotten by some, hunted by others. And in the shadows of Essos, they grew, one bitter, the other unaware of what she would one day become. But in Westeros, the dragon had fallen. Aerys, the Mad King, had ruled in fire and madness. His reign was not only the end of a dynasty, it was the end of belief. The Iron Throne, once a symbol of unity and strength, now stood as a monument to folly, forged in flame and fed by pride. The realm remembered, not the glory of Valyria, not the majesty of dragons, but the madness of kings. After the fall of House Targaryen, the winds of Westeros shifted westward, away from fire and prophecy, towards steel, coin, and fleeting peace. The Seven Kingdoms crowned Robert Baratheon as king, a man of fury and laughter, of war and wine. He sat upon the Iron Throne not by right of blood, but by conquest and common cause. His victory ended a dynasty that had ruled for nearly 3 centuries. The dragons were gone, the bloodline was broken, but not entirely. Across the narrow sea, 2 children of the old line clung to life in the shadows of exile. Viserys, called the Beggar King, and Daenerys, last daughter of Westeros. a babe not yet touched by memory, born amidst storm and chaos on the island of Dragonstone, the final Targaryen stronghold. She drew her first breath as her family drew their last. The storm that shattered the fleet that night was said to be the fiercest in living memory. Winds howled like wolves. Waves swallowed warships whole. And in the black tower of the castle, lit by lightning and the moaning sea, Queen Riella died, birthing her daughter. The midwives wept, for the realm was lost, and the girl was left without mother, crown, or homeland. The next morning, news arrived. The Mad King was slain, her brother Rhaegar had fallen at the Trident, her niece and nephew butchered, and Robert Baratheon reigned. Daenerys was not born into fire, but into ruin. Ser Willem Darry, a loyalist knight of the old regime, smuggled the children away. With him sailed a few retainers, loyal in name and fading in strength. They fled from Dragonstone to the free cities, Illyrio's manse and Pintos, the narrow canals of Bravos, the sun-soaked plazas of Myr and Lys, drifting from patron to patron, always hunted, always watched. Their names were whispered as curses by some and prophecies by others. To the lords of Westeros, the Targaryens were relics. Their skulls gathered dust in the Red Keep. Their bloodline was poisoned, their memory feared. The usurper's agents, Robert's spies and assassins, searched across the sea. Once, a Sellsword band was paid to kill a boy with silver hair. In Bravos, a whore with lavender eyes was cut down on suspicion alone. Viserys kept them moving, always restless, always burning with bitterness. He wore the crown only in his dreams, and in the alleys of foreign cities, he spoke often of the day he would take back what was rightfully his. He was the older, the heir in his own mind, but he had no army, no coin, no allies of note. He sold their mother's jewels, bartered away the last of their servants, and begged feasts from foreign lords. He promised dragons for loyalty, but there were no dragons left. He called himself King Viserys, but the world called him the Beggar King. And Daenerys? She was the shadow of his ambition. Quiet, careful, watchful. She learned to survive in silence. Her brother's moods were storms, sweet one moment, violent the next. He reminded her of her birthright with every breath, pressed the weight of their family's pride upon her like a crown of iron. She belonged to him, he said. Her destiny was his to shape. When she turned 13, he sold her. To Khal Drogo, horse lord of the Dothraki, a war chieftain with 99 braids and 10,000 riders. In exchange, Viserys received promises, ships, soldiers, a golden crown. But Daenerys received something else entirely. At first, only fear. The Dothraki were unlike any she had known. Savage, she thought. Riders who feared the sea, whose language was wind and hoofbeats, whose customs shamed her. She wept in silence, endured in solitude. But then, something changed. The girl who had bent her head to her brother, who had flinched at every sharp word, began to rise. Khal Drogo's power became hers to wield. His respect came not from obedience, but from fire in her eyes. She learned his tongue, his people, their strength. In the heat of the great grass sea, Daenerys Targaryen began to awaken. In V's Dothrak, the ancient city of the horse lords, she entered the womb of the world and ate the raw heart of a stallion to prove her unborn child's strength. They named the child Rhaego, the stallion who mounts the world. They looked upon Daenerys and saw not a silver-haired child, but a Khaleesi of steel and flame. Then came the turning. Her brother demanded his crown. Drunk, raging, he confronted Drogo, sword in hand. "Give me my crown," he spat. And Drogo did. He melted gold in a pot and poured it over Viserys' head, a crown of molten death. Daenerys watched, unflinching. "He was no dragon," she said calmly. "Fire cannot kill a dragon." Her chains were gone. With Drogo at her side, she rode at the head of the Khalasar. But destiny is a cruel beast. Drogo was wounded during a raid. His wound festered, and a healer's lies twisted love into horror. Daenerys begged for his life, and the blood magic that followed cost her everything. Rhaego was born dead. Drogo lived, barely, a husk of himself, eyes open but empty. Daenerys smothered him beneath the stars. But in her grief, something ancient stirred. She built a pyre, placed her husband's body atop it, along with the betrayers. Into the flames, she set the 3 petrified dragon eggs, a gift from Valyria, beautiful relics from a lost age. She stepped into the fire, eyes unblinking, hair flowing like silver in moonlight. The flames consumed all, and in the morning, Daenerys walked from the ashes, unburnt. 3 dragons coiled around her feet, black, green, and gold, wailing their first cries into the world. Drogon, Rhaegal, Viserion. The world changed that day. In the deserts of Essos, magic returned. The Red Priests saw visions in their flames. Whispers of prophecy stirred again. The blood of the dragon had birthed fire once more. No longer a girl, no longer a pawn. Daenerys Targaryen, Stormborn, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, had become something new. A queen, not of a court, nor of stone walls, but of fire, of ash, and of destiny. From the red pyre of Khal Drogo's funeral rose a vision not seen in centuries. Dragons. Alive, screeching, writhing, born of fire, cradled by a girl cloaked in ash. The miracle spread across the sands of Essos like a wind-driven flame, stoking whispers in taverns, temples, and thrones. The dragon lords of old had returned, or rather, one dragon lord, crowned not by coronation, but by fire itself. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, mother of dragons. No longer the quiet girl trailing behind her brother, Daenerys had stepped into myth. She had no army, no wealth, and no throne, but she had something greater, the image of destiny. Across the great grass sea, in cities bound by chains and gold, her name began to slither through the lips of the desperate, the enslaved, the ambitious, and the broken. Her first steps as queen were not taken in castles or courts, but in the unforgiving red wastes. With her khalasar broken, her people starving, and her dragons too young to offer more than smoke and squealing cries, Daenerys pressed forward. And from her struggle came rebirth. In the merchant city of Qarth, where perfumed lyres wore silk like armor and gold flowed like poison, she was offered comfort, but at a cost. The 13 who ruled the city saw her as spectacle. Some wanted her dragons. Others wanted her body. The warlocks of the House of the Undying offered her visions, cryptic, cruel, and haunting. She saw herself walking through halls of snow and ash. A throne room ruined. A city laid waste. A glimpse of things to come, or illusions meant to tempt. She left Qarth with no army, but with steel in her spine. Across the sea, the cities of Slaver's Bay whispered of a silver-haired queen with fire in her womb. Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen. Ancient slave empires whose walls were built by blood and whose palaces rose upon the backs of the chained. Daenerys turned her eyes upon them not with conquest alone, but with fury. In Astapor, she was offered an army, the Unsullied. Eunuch soldiers, trained from birth, brutalized into obedience. A single word from their masters could send them into death without flinching. Daenerys accepted the deal. In exchange for all the Unsullied and their infants, she gave the slavers one of her dragons. But when the whip was placed in her hand, when the slaver called her mistress, Daenerys turned and gave the dragon a command. Dracarys. Flames erupted. Flesh melted. Chains fell. The Unsullied stood, blinking, uncertain. She offered them freedom, to fight for her not as slaves, but as men. They chose her. Astapor burned. Yunkai followed. More resistance, more betrayal, but again, she prevailed. And then Meereen, jewel of Slaver's Bay, fell to her banners. Daenerys, breaker of chains, made the city her seat. She vowed to teach herself rule before reaching for Westeros. But the Game of Thrones plays differently in marble halls than it does in the field. The city seethed beneath her. The noble families despised her reforms. Her enemies plotted within shadowed pyramids. The sons of the Harpy, masked killers bound to the old order, struck at night. Her dragons grew restless. Regal and Valyrian were chained beneath the city. Drogon vanished into the wild. Love, too, betrayed her. She took Dario Naharis, a Sellsword with eyes like oceans and morals like smoke, as her lover and captain. She banished Ser Jorah Mormont, once her truest shield, upon discovering his past betrayal. And yet her heart remained cleaved, between duty and desire, between justice and peace. Then came blood. At the great games of Meereen, in a fighting pit filled with thousands, the Harpy struck in full. Flames erupted, men screamed, and from the sky came a roar. Drogon, the great black dragon, tore into the enemy like a storm given flesh. Daenerys mounted him, soaring into the heavens. Queen of Fire made myth once more. But she did not return at once. For weeks, she vanished into the grasslands beyond Meereen. Some believed her dead. Others called her ascended. She wandered, half-starved, sick, and alone, with only Drogon to shield her. Then came the Dothraki, a new Khalasar, vast and wild. They found her not as a Khaleesi, but as a trespasser. She was taken before Khal Moro. They laughed when she spoke of Drogo, laughed harder when she claimed to be a queen. But fire does not beg. That night, Daenerys set flame to the temple of the Dosh Khaleen, where the widows of dead Khals were meant to wither. Locked inside with every Khal who doubted her, she stepped once more into fire. And once more, she emerged unburnt. The Dothraki fell to their knees. The queen had returned, not only to Meereen, but to destiny. She marched with fire at her back and 10,000 screamers at her side. Tyrion Lannister awaited her, sent by Varys as advisor and voice of Westeros. A man raised in courtly politics, cynical and brilliant. He saw in her not only power, but the chance to remake the world. But even with dragons and Unsullied and Dothraki, Meereen was not safe. Yunkai and Astapor, allied with the slave cities and backed by gold and fear, brought siege to her walls. Ships filled the bay. Treachery lined the streets. And then, the sky split open. The dragons were freed. Regal and Valyrian burst from their chains. Drogon shrieked from the sky. Fire turned the fleet to cinders. The Harpy screamed. Daenerys rode through flame and smoke, not as Queen of Meereen, but as Queen of War. When the fires cooled, she made ready for Westeros. Her banners flew from black masts. The dragons wheeled above the sea. At her side sailed Tyrion, Varys, Missandei, Grey Worm, the Dothraki, and the Unsullied. She had taken no crown by blood, no throne by inheritance, but she came with the winds of destiny at her back. Queen of Ashes, some would call her, but in her own mind, she was the Queen of Fire, of justice, of liberation, of the Seven Kingdoms, stolen from her family by treachery and steel. As she crossed the narrow sea, the first Targaryen to do so in generations, her father's shadow loomed behind her. Aerys had promised fire. He had whispered of burning cities and cleansing flame. Daenerys promised something else, a better world. But better worlds are not given. They are taken, and fire is a fickle servant. The narrow sea was quiet the morning she crossed it. No war horns, no storm, no fire. Just the slow groan of wood, the creak of rigging, and the wings of dragons wheeling through clouded sky. 3 beasts above, 3 heads of flame and scale. Beneath them, sails bore the sigil of House Targaryen, red 3-headed dragon upon black, and below that, the queen, cloaked in silence, watched the shore of her homeland rise from mist. Westeros. She had not seen it with her own eyes, not since she lay swaddled on Dragonstone's cold stone floor as her mother died in childbirth. Yet the bones of this land were her bones. Its rivers ran with her father's blood. Its halls echoed with the laughter of kin long dead. Her ancestors had ruled this continent for nearly 300 years. It was not merely a return, it was a reckoning. Her fleet landed upon the black shore of Dragonstone, the ancient seat of House Targaryen. The castle, carved of black stone in the days of Valyria, stood jagged and cruel against the sea's fury. It had once been the last refuge of her family. Now it would be her first step in taking back the realm. Daenerys walked its halls slowly. No banners flew. No lords knelt. Only salt wind and stone remained to greet her. She laid her hand on the carved table where Aegon the Conqueror had once plotted the conquest of Westeros. Tyrion stood at her side, watching the lines drawn across the table, rivers, castles, mountains. "Shall we begin?" he asked. And so began the final war. Her claim was strong by blood, but power in Westeros is not won by name alone. The realm she sought to claim was broken, reeling from years of war. The War of the Five Kings had left the land in ruin, and now a new queen wore the crown. Cersei Lannister, widow of Robert Baratheon, queen in name and vengeance, seated upon the Iron Throne in a palace of bones. Cersei would not yield. She had no dragons, but she had cruelty, cunning, and wildfire enough to match. She ruled through fear, through gold, through a tight coil of power that choked the court. Her enemies had fallen or fled, and those who remained dared not speak against her. Daenerys, meanwhile, forged alliances. Yara Greyjoy and Theon brought the Ironborn, promising ships and loyalty in return for independence. Valyria Sand of Dorne offered vengeance for her slain prince. Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns, brought gold, wisdom, and fury, for House Tyrell had been gutted by Cersei's wildfire in the September of Baelor. But Daenerys listened to wiser counsel as well. Tyrion, Hand of the Queen, urged patience, politics, restraint. "We do not come to be Queen of Ashes," he said. The memory of Aerys still stung the realm. Fire alone would not win Westeros. She moved slowly, too slowly. Cersei struck first. Euron Greyjoy, mad captain of the Iron Fleet, sacked the Dornish ships, captured Yara, and offered her as a gift to the queen. The Sand Snakes were slain. Dorne silenced. Then Casterly Rock fell to the Unsullied, but it was a trap. Jaime Lannister outmaneuvered them, sacking Highgarden and claiming the Reach's wealth. Lady Olenna drank poison in her tower, but not before whispering one final truth to Jaime. "Tell Cersei. I want her to know it was me." The losses mounted. Daenerys' restraint began to crack. The realm saw her dragons and armies and wondered why they waited. She had come as a liberator, but what was liberation without action? So she acted. With Drogon beneath her, she burned the Lannister army returning from Highgarden. Soldiers were turned to ash. Wagons of gold melted into the grass. The sky thundered with flame. Lord Randall Tarly and his son, Dickon, refused to bend the knee. She burned them alive. Tyrion watched, horror in his eyes. Varys whispered of fire and madness. The question began to rise, not only in the court but across the realm. Was she her father's daughter? Jon Snow came with the answer. The king in the north, called back from death by powers unknown, came south not to fight, but to plead. The true enemy, he said, was not Cersei. It was death. Beyond the wall, the Night King marched with an army of the dead, whites and white walkers, bound by ice and dark magic. The long night was coming. Daenerys did not believe, but she listened. Together, they flew north beyond the wall to see the threat with their own eyes. There, in frozen waste, surrounded by the undead, her dragon Viserion fell, speared by the Night King's lance. The beast crashed into the ice, and when the walkers pulled it from the depths, its eyes opened blue as frozen moonlight. Daenerys wept, not only for the dragon, but for the truth. She brought her armies to the north. The dead came. The long night fell. At Winterfell, the greatest armies of Westeros stood together, Starks and Targaryens, knights and wildlings, unsullied and Dothraki. And in the darkness, death came. The battle raged through the night. Flame flickered and died. Blades clashed. Screams echoed. The dead rose again, unrelenting. Daenerys and Jon fought from above, Drogon lighting the sky. But even dragonfire could not end the Night King. It was Arya Stark who struck the blow. In the God's Wood, as the Night King reached for Bran, the blade came swift, falling through frost. The walkers shattered. The dead fell. Winter broke. But peace did not follow. Daenerys had bled for Westeros. Lost Regal to Euron's scorpions. Lost Missandei to Cersei's cruelty. Her advisors were dead or doubting. Her love for Jon turned to pain when the truth was revealed. He, too, was a Targaryen. Aegon, son of Rhaegar, his claim stronger than hers. And the people whispered his name. In King's Landing, Cersei refused surrender. Daenerys offered mercy once more. It was refused. The bells rang in surrender. The city cried for peace. Daenerys did not answer with mercy. She answered with fire. Drogon soared over the city. Towers fell. Stone melted. The Red Keep crumbled. Ash fell like snow. Soldiers, women, children, none were spared. Fire consumed all. Tyrion resigned in horror. Jon confronted her. Daenerys, standing before the shattered throne, spoke not of victory, but of liberation, of breaking the wheel, of purifying the world with flame. Jon kissed her, and then drove a dagger through her heart. She died as she had lived, alone, believing in a better world, destroyed by the one she tried to save. Drogon wept. He melted the Iron Throne with dragonfire, then flew east with her body, vanishing into myth. The wars ended. Bran the Broken was crowned king. Tyrion became Hand. Jon returned to the north, beyond the wall. Peace, for now. But something remained in the ashes. Not a throne, not a queen. A question: what is power, if not fire contained? And who will rise again, when the world forgets what fire once was? There is a tale often told in hushed tones within the halls of Old Town, where maesters record the rise and fall of kings as though such stories are mere ink and parchment. In that tale, the dragons perished, and the blood that bore them was scattered like ash upon the winds. The line of House Targaryen had ended, so say the scribes. The crown passed on. Peace was restored. The fire was extinguished. But fire is never truly gone. It only sleeps. In the smoldering aftermath of Daenerys Targaryen's death, the world turned its gaze toward the future. The ashes of King's Landing cooled, and from them rose a council of lords, shattered by war and weary of blood. The Iron Throne, once the iron crown of conquest, lay twisted and melted, a symbol consumed by the very ambition it once rewarded. And from that ruin, a new monarch was chosen, not by fire and sword, but by voice and compromise. Bran the Broken, son of Eddard Stark, was crowned king of the Six Kingdoms. The North claimed its ancient sovereignty under Queen Sansa. Tyrion Lannister, the twice condemned, became Hand of the King. Arya sailed west, and Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen in blood, bastard in name, was sent to the Wall, exiled for a mercy killing. To the world, this was the end of the dragon's tale. But the legacy of House Targaryen was never solely in crowns and castles. It was in the blood. It was in prophecy, in fire, in the shape of dreams that bent the world toward change. The line had frayed, yes. The dragons had died, yes. But the story lingered. There are those who whisper that Drogon did not simply flee, that the great beast carried Daenerys eastward, to old Valyria or beyond, that fire and death still walk in lands forgotten. The Red Priests of R'hllor, stirred by her rebirth and her sacrifice, proclaimed her Azor Ahai, the chosen reborn to cleanse the world in fire. In their temples, candles still burn in her name. In Volantis, in the shadows of the Black Wall, devout followers speak of a queen who will return. They see omens in the stars. dreams in flame, visions of silver-haired children and black-winged vengeance. They believe her death was not an end, but an awakening. For Targaryens were never like other rulers. They were not simply kings. They were symbols. And symbols, once burned into the soul of a people, do not die with breath. They rise again and again, in stories, in songs, in the secret hearts of those who remember. Some speak of a girl born in Ass-High with eyes like lilac and skin like dusk, of a riderless dragon circling the smoking sea, of a boy in the ruins of Valyria who speaks a forgotten tongue and sings to flame. Are these mere fables? Perhaps. But so too was Daenerys, once a beggar girl in exile. So too was Aegon, once a minor lord with dreams of conquest. The legacy of House Targaryen was never built on certainty. It was built on the impossible. And the truth remains. The blood of the dragon does not vanish in a single breath. Jon Snow yet lives. He walks beyond the wall with ghost and free folk, far from crowns, but not beyond history. He is a Targaryen, though he claims no name. In his veins stirs the last great river of fire. He may not seek destiny, but destiny may still seek him. Even in Westeros, the symbols endure. Dragonstone remains, its black towers untouched. The skulls of dragons still lie beneath the Red Keep, scorched but preserved. Maesters still argue in shadowed libraries over the truth of prophecy. Some claim that the Song of Ice and Fire was never meant to crown a single ruler, but to reveal the truth of power itself. What is fire, if not the promise of transformation? What is ice, if not the inevitability of resistance? Together, they forge the wheel, and perhaps, together, they might still break it. For the wheel spins ever on. Empires rise, kings fall, and memory fades. But fire remembers. Fire lingers. The story of House Targaryen is not only the tale of rulers. It is the tale of those who dared to dream beyond their station. Of Rhaenys and Visenya, who conquered not only with blade, but with belief. Of Baelor the Blessed, who walked barefoot and spoke of peace. Of Daenerys, who freed slaves, birthed dragons, and died with the dream of a better world in her heart. Some call her the Mad Queen. Others call her a liberator. But even in death, she stirs the winds. The Golden Company, Sellsword's once formed to restore the Blackfires, have not vanished, though broken. In the east, heirs and pretenders rise. In Lys, in Myr, in the forgotten bastards of Volantis, the blood of old Valyria still quickens. And in the cryptic dreams of those touched by prophecy, dragons yet fly. There will always be those who remember, who whisper Dracarys not as a threat, but as a prayer. The legacy of flame is not confined to the living. It smolders in the hearts of those born too late, in the pages of burned books, in the stones of towers that remember dragon wings. It waits, and though the world may forget the names and battles, the songs remain. Songs of conquest and sacrifice, songs of mothers and monsters, songs of fire and of blood. One day, another Targaryen may rise, not as conqueror, but as rebuilder, not to sit the Iron Throne, but to remake the world entirely, not for vengeance, not for power, but for something greater, peace, perhaps, or prophecy fulfilled. And when that day comes, the realm will tremble once more, and the skies will thunder with wings. For the dragon is not dead. It is only sleeping. Long before Aegon the Conqueror set foot upon the shores of Westeros, before dragons darkened the skies above Harrenhal, and even before Valyria was drowned in fire and stone, there were whispers. Whispers of a shadow rising in the cold of the world. Whispers of a prince born of ancient blood who would stand against the long night. It was not a tale of lords or banners, but of stars and swords, of sacrifice and salvation. A prophecy older than thrones. Older, perhaps, than men. The Targaryens carried this prophecy from Valyria. Not just the blood of dragons, but the burden of foresight. Though their kin in old Valyria mocked dreams and dismissed omens, the Targaryens listened. It was not dragonfire alone that brought them to Dragonstone before the doom. It was vision. Daenerys the Dreamer, daughter of Lord Eonar Targaryen, saw the fall of Valyria in her sleep, a cataclysm of flame, earth, and death. Her father heeded her words, abandoning the empire at the height of its glory. A generation later, the world burned, and the Targaryens alone survived. This same blood birthed other dreamers, each touched by the flickering winds of prophecy. Some spoke of doom, others of greatness. But one prophecy returned again and again, etched into the hearts of dragon lords like fire carved into flesh. A prince would come, the prince that was promised. He would be born from the line of kings in a time of great darkness and wield a burning sword, the sword of heroes. He would stand against the night and restore balance to the world. Azor Ahai Reborn. The legends of Azor Ahai come from Ashai and the Shadowlands beyond. There, in the ancient blackness, the first long night is said to have fallen, a winter without end, a world frozen and starless, where the dead hunted the living and hope was a forgotten word. Azor Ahai, in those tales, forged a sword to end the darkness. Not once, but thrice. The first blade shattered. The second smoked and cracked. The third, he tempered by plunging it into the heart of his beloved wife, Nissa. Her scream of agony fused her soul with steel, and thus was Lightbringer born, a weapon of living flame. It was said that when the cold returned, Azor Ahai would be born again, under a bleeding star, amidst salt and smoke, and he would stand alone against the shadow. For generations, the Targaryens guarded this secret. Not all believed, but some did, fervently. Rhaegar Targaryen was one such prince. Born in grief at Summerhall, amid the smoke of charred dreams and the salt of tears, he became obsessed with prophecy. He believed he was the chosen one, a sword in one hand, a harp in the other. But prophecy is a mirror that cracks in many hands. When his path ended beneath Robert's warhammer, others looked to his children. His son by Elia, Aegon. Then, his child by Lyanna Stark, Jon Snow. He was born beneath a bleeding star. Salt clung to his mother's cheeks. Smoke from the Tower of Joy's pyre drifted into the mountain wind. And his name, whispered by a dying woman, was Aegon Targaryen. The prince that was promised? Melisandre of Ashai thought it was Stannis. She spoke of Lightbringer, of visions in flame, of a war to come. But her faith wavered. Visions deceived her. Stannis fell, and still the long night crept closer. In the end, it was Jon who stood at the gates of winter, who led the living against the dead, who held the wall, who brokered alliance between North and Dragon, Stark and Targaryen. And in Daenerys, too, the omens aligned. Born in storm, walking unburnt from flame, mother of dragons, the last children of fire. Salt and smoke wrapped around her like a cloak. Was she the chosen one? Or he? Some say it was Arya, whose blade ended the Night King beneath the Weirwood's gaze. But Arya bore no prophecy, spoke no ancient tongue. She was not born for fate. She simply chose. And perhaps that is the truest lesson of prophecy, that it binds those who believe in it, that it chains kings and queens to ghosts, turns wisdom to obsession, love to doom. Rhaegar died chasing it. Daenerys was consumed by it. Jon forsook it, and in doing so, perhaps fulfilled it. The truth remains elusive. Was Lightbringer a sword or a symbol? Was the prince not one, but many? Daenerys brought fire. Jon brought ice. Together, they ended the war against death. But the cost was terrible, and the world they left behind was not healed, only altered. The Maesters, of course, dismiss prophecy. They speak of it as fever dream and coincidence. Yet even they cannot explain how Daenerys emerged unburnt from flame, how 3 dragons were born again, how the Night King fell the very moment winter's breath reached its coldest peak. Prophecy may not be destiny, but it is power. A story, once believed, can shape empires. It can make madmen into kings and orphans into legends. The Song of Ice and Fire may not have a single singer. It may not end with a chorus or a crown, but it echoes in the flames that whisper names long lost, in the snow that falls on quiet graves, in the eyes of those yet to be born who will look to the past and wonder what was dream and what was truth. The prophecy lives on, not in scrolls or temples, but in the blood, in every silver-haired child who rides a windborne flame across the mountains of the east, in every cold-eyed warden who watches the north with quiet dread, in every soul who dares to ask, not who will sit the throne, but who will save the world when night falls again. The prince that was promised may never come, or perhaps he already did. Perhaps the sword is not what matters, only the hand that chooses to raise it. In the aftermath of fire and war, when thrones had melted and prophecies faded like smoke into wind, there remained one truth unbroken: blood. Blood endures. It hides, it changes names, it crosses oceans, but it endures. And the blood of the dragon, older than Westeros itself, still flowed in veins too quiet for the world to notice. House Targaryen was shattered. Its last crowned queen lay buried beneath whispers and ash. Its dragons, save for one, had fallen in battle or vanished into the unknown. Its throne, once a jagged nest of conquest, was gone, melted beneath the grief of a beast and the fire of mourning. Yet the story was not over. Jon Snow yet lived, exiled to the north, to walk among the free folk in the snow-covered lands beyond the wall. The last living son of Rhaegar Targaryen bore no crown, no title, no ambition. He had always claimed to be no one, a bastard, a watcher, a sword. But in truth, he was Aegon, son of the prince who once believed himself the chosen, born of Lyanna Stark in blood and pain. He bore the blood of dragons and wolves both, fire and ice, the very balance that bards and seers had long dreamed might save the world. And yet, he walked away from the realm. The lords of Westeros, even those who knew his truth, allowed him to vanish. Perhaps they feared him, perhaps they pitied him, or perhaps, in the end, they knew the truth. Some bloodlines are too great to rule without burning all they touch. But blood such as his does not end with silence. There are tales now, told around wildling hearths in the shadow of the farthest frost, of a man with snow-white fur beside him and a shadow in his eyes, of a man who speaks to wolves and disappears with the storm. Some call him Ghost. Others say he walks between the world of men and old magic. But in those tales, the blood of the dragon has not gone cold. It waits, far across the sea, beyond the ruins of Valyria and the smoke-wreathed mountains of the Shadowlands. The old blood still sings. In the free cities, where noble lines blur and bastards are born with silver hair and violet eyes, rumors take root. Some claim that Daenerys bore child before her death, that her line lives, hidden by loyalists in secret houses, waiting for the flame to rise again. Others point to bastards sired by Targaryens during their centuries of rule. The great bastards, the Blackfires, were only the most famous. There were others, scattered through the alleys of Lys, the palaces of Myr, and the islands of the Summer Sea. One boy in Tyrosh, they say, speaks Valyrian as though it were prayer. Another girl in Qohor is said to sleep beside coals without burning. A child born beneath the red moon in Volantis breathed smoke instead of tears. All stories, all fables, or perhaps seeds. The red priests of R'hllor believe the blood of the dragon is sacred, that it binds the mortal world to flame. After Daenerys' death, they lit their fires anew, proclaiming her a divine figure. Statues were raised, temples consecrated. Her image, arms raised, dragons circling, became a symbol of fire unextinguished. Some priests turned their gaze to the next ember, to Jon, to others unknown, to any trace of the flame that still flickers. And in Westeros itself, Though House Targaryen was struck from the roles of nobility, the memory lingers. The name is not forgotten, nor is the fear. Small folk still leave offerings at the foot of Dragonstone. Mothers still tell children tales of the Silver Queen who rode flame. And beneath the Red Keep, the skulls of the great dragons remain untouched, silent sentinels of an age when gods walked. The bloodline may be fractured, but it is not extinct. For blood is not only measured in names and records. It lives in song, in story, in the very magic of the world. The Valyrians were not like other men, and the Targaryens, descended from the purest of their line, bore that fire within them not only in dragons, but in themselves. Bran the Broken, seated upon the throne of 6 kingdoms, sees further than most. What visions pass behind those quiet eyes, none can say. But he, too, remembers. And he has not spoken of Jon's name to the realm, nor has he moved against those who whisper of dragon heirs abroad. Perhaps he knows that the fire must sleep. Perhaps he knows it will wake again. For the wheel of history turns, and always it returns to fire. To the dream of a family who once believed they could shape the world as dragons shape wind. To a bloodline that rose from ash and always leaves it behind. To the truth that Targaryen blood, once spilled, does not vanish. It soaks into the stones, and from those stones grows again. There may come a day when another silver-haired child touches flame and does not burn. When another banner is sewn with 3-headed dragons, not in memory, but in warning. And when that day comes, the realm will remember that it never buried House Targaryen. It merely waited. In the silent places, in the blood, in the fire, in the deep hours of night, when hearths burn low and the wind howls like wolves across the moors, the old stories return. Not in the words of lords or the ink of maesters, but in song, soft, haunting, full of fire and mourning. These are not songs of peace. They are not lullabies. They are warnings and prayers and memories of a house that once soared on dragon wings and fell in smoke. The story of House Targaryen is not written in a single scroll. It cannot be contained by any throne, nor undone by any sword. It is a song of blood and fire, of vision and madness, of love and loss. And like all true songs, it does not end when the singers fall silent. For it began before conquest, in the high halls of Valyria, where dragons coiled through the skies like gods of war and beauty. Enar the Exile fled that empire, guided by his daughter's dream, carrying with him the last unbroken thread of prophecy. From Dragonstone, his line watched as Valyria was swallowed by fire and death. And in that moment, a torch was passed not by choice, but by fate. Aegon the Conqueror, Valyrian the Black Dread, sisters with swords and dragons. In a single generation, they bent all of Westeros to their will, not with cruelty alone, but with vision. They forged not merely an empire, but a myth. A house born of fire, sustained by fire, doomed by fire. Then came the great kings and their choices. Maegor the Cruel with his iron fist, Jaehaerys the Conciliator with his peace, Viserys with his dreams, Rhaenyra and Aegon II with their dragons warring sky to sky. The dance of the dragons, a wound upon the world. And with it, the beginning of the end. The dragons grew smaller, the magic weaker, the blood diluted, the prophecy clouded, yet the line endured. Through rebellion and rot, through madness and mercy, the black fires rose and fell. The crown changed hands by fire and sword. And even as the world turned against them, the Targaryens still believed, some in destiny, some in delusion. And then Daenerys, the last flame. She rose from ash and exile, born in storm, raised in fear, made queen not by coronation, but by trial. She broke chains. She raised cities. She birthed dragons. She reached across the world to reclaim a crown born in her blood. And when the realm turned its back on her, when love betrayed her, and peace proved a lie, she chose fire. Some call her savior. Others call her tyrant. But all who lived in her time remember the sky torn by wings, the sound of bells drowned by flame, and the bitter truth that power without mercy becomes its own undoing. Even now, the maesters try to close her chapter, to bind the scroll, to record her name with finality. But stories do not end with ink. Her ashes were carried east by a dragon whose grief scorched the clouds. Her dreams live on in temples and whispers. Her memory is burned into stone and soul alike. And Jon Snow, Aegon, born of two houses, forged in ice and fire, fled the throne he never sought. He buried love with his own hands. He passed into the wild, not as king or prince, but as a man broken by truth. Yet in his veins still flows the blood that once ruled all. Perhaps that is where the truest Targaryen lives, not on thrones, but in those who carry fire with no desire to burn the world. Because that is what the song teaches. Not that dragons are invincible, but that they are fragile, that those who ride them must be stronger than steel, softer than ash, wiser than fire. That those who dream of shaping the world must first understand the price of holding it. So now, the realm sleeps. Peace reigns under Bran the Broken. The north is free. The dragons are gone. The Iron Throne is ash. But the song continues. In corners of Essos, where red-robed priests speak of rebirth. In the children of bastards who bear silver hair and speak Valyrian in their dreams. In dragon eggs traded by smugglers, hidden in vaults, waiting to hatch. And in the wind. For in every age, someone hears it. The faint beating of wings, the soft cry of a newborn dragon, the echo of a queen's voice calling from fire. Dracarys. It is a word, a command, a memory. It is what the Targaryens gave the world. Fire, and the choice of what to do with it. The legacy of House Targaryen is not glory. It is not conquest. It is not prophecy fulfilled. It is warning. That greatness without restraint leads to ruin. That dreams, when followed blindly, can devour kingdoms. And yet, that same fire can bring light, can guide, can warm the coldest night. It is the song that never ends. A song of rise and fall, of hope and terror, of dragons. And somewhere, someday, when the stars shift and the world forgets, the fire will rise again. Not as vengeance, not as a crown, but as truth. For fire does not forget, and neither does the blood of the dragon. And so the tale draws to silence. The fire that once turned cities to cinders now flickers in memory. House Targaryen, born of dragon lords, shaped by prophecy, devoured by its own flame, leaves behind not only ruin and reverence, but a question that still stirs in the bones of the realm. Was it worth the blood? The dreams? The burn? Their legacy lingers in the black stones of Dragonstone, in the shadowed crypts beneath King's Landing, in the eyes of children who still dream of flying. But theirs was never the only song. Beyond the pyres and banners, other houses rise and fall. The wolves guard the north. The lions bare their teeth in gilded courts. The kraken stir beneath storm-tossed waves. Even the quiet reeds and the wandering sparrows hold chapters yet untold. The wheel has turned, but its spokes are many, and the wind still carries the scent of smoke. If you would linger in this world a little longer, there are still stories waiting, tales hidden in tower shadows, scrawled on old maps, buried in snow and sand alike. Stories of ancient swords and forgotten gods, of maesters who know too much and ghosts who never left. Or, if the hour is late, let the story sleep. Let the dragons rest. But should you seek fire again, follow this voice. Let it guide you to the old halls, the broken thrones, the truths that kings have buried. Subscribe to keep the lore alive, because the past is never just the past in Westeros. It waits, it watches, and even when the fire dies, history remembers. Sleep well, and may your dreams be dragon-winged. Have a good night.